Details of the Targaryens' blood magic that's passed down the family tree are lost to every character in the story. We know they're special, but the real truth of how they became so overpowered was left behind on their homeland, Valyria, during their rushed escape to Westeros. An observation was made 9 generations in by the best Targaryen king to rule over this house. No family member has ever gotten sick. Jaehaerys Targaryen, before he became more commonly called the Old King, was putting together something called the Doctrine of Exceptionalism that would save his family from a wild case of religious persecution. The Faith of the Seven had a real problem with their habit of incestuous marriages. To end the fighting, Jaehaerys gathered all the Septons who could close their eyes to all the incest. Septons speak on behalf of the Faith's gods. A few of them admired Jaehaerys' level-headed approach to ruling, so spread his propaganda for him about the Targaryens' exceptionalism. One god made us all, Andals and Valyrians and First Men, Septon Alfin would proclaim from his litter. But he did not make us all alike. He made the lion and the aurochs as well. Both noble beasts, but certain gifts gave to one and not the other. And the lion cannot live as an aurochs, nor an aurochs as a lion. For you to bed your sister would be a grievous sin, sir, but you are not the blood of the dragon, nor am I. What they do is what they have always done, and it is not for us to judge them. Their skin was very pale, eyes purple, and hair a unique silvery gold. That set them apart from other races. But what made them superior over all common man was their supernatural beauty, ability to tame dragons, and immunity to all diseases and illness. This propaganda even worked within the family. In the last book, A Dance with Dragons, countless people have contracted a plague-like illness and are quickly surrounding Daenerys' location so that their savior can protect them. The stench of the camp was so appalling, it was all that Dany could do not to gag. Sir Barristan wrinkled up his nose and said, "Your Grace should not be here, breathing these black humours." "I am the blood of the dragon," Dany reminded him. "Have you ever seen a dragon with the flux?" Viserys had often claimed that Targaryens were untroubled by the pestilences that afflicted common man. And so far as she could tell, it was true. She could remember being cold and hungry and afraid, but never sick. Even so, the old knight said, "I would feel better if your grace would return to the city." The many-colored brick walls of Meereen were half a mile back. The bloody flux has been the bane of every army since the Dawn Age. Let us distribute the food, your grace. On the morrow, I am here now, I want to see. We're left on a cliffhanger on whether or not she truly contracted the bloody flux. While lost in the open grasslands, she gets the crazy shits associated with the flux, but also eats possibly poisonous berries. Gotta love decade-long cliffhangers. But here's Jaehaerys and his yes-man's excuse for the immunity. Since Aenar the Exile first staked his claim to Dragonstone, that had been known. Targaryens did not die of pox or the bloody flux. They were not afflicted with red spots or brown leg or the shaking sickness. They would not succumb to warm bone, or clotted lung, or sour gut, or any of the myriad pestilences and contagions that the gods, for reasons of their own, see fit to loose on mortal men and women. There was fire in the blood of the dragon, it was reasoned, a purifying fire that burned out all such plagues. They are more comfortable in hotter climates because of their ancestral homeland being a volcanic hellhole. They're not immune to fire, nor are they untroubled by viruses that inflict common man. Making it 9 generations without a notable disease is a hell of a feat for the Targaryens, but we gotta look a little closer to the quieter deaths in the family. Yes, there could be some protection magic in their blood, but it could just be that they're so rich that they could afford to have maesters and healers. Aegon the Conqueror, who united the 7 kingdoms, lived a long and eventful life, making it to age 64. He's the first Targaryen who has their life heavily detailed. A stroke is what did him in. His heir, the 2nd king of the 7 kingdoms, Aenys, drove himself sick with fear and indecision. Though this character is described as sickly when he was born. But sickly doesn't necessarily mean sick with anything, you just look weak. At age 35, he looked like a man of 60, often going to bed with loose bowels and stomach cramps. The Grand Maester couldn't help him. The stress of being hated and rebels popping up likely did him in. Though his stepmom, the Queen Visenya, was involved in his care, who had good reason for wanting him dead. Poisoning is possible. Visenya made it to 73 until the first signs of her body failing began. Something caused her to dramatically lose weight, and in the span of a year, she went from a dragon-riding badass granny to a funeral pyre. None of these 3 deaths would fall into the category of a virus, so Jaehaerys, the 4th king, got a pass with his exceptionalism argument. 5 years into the doctrine becoming official law, Jaehaerys' own daughter became the first known Targaryen to get sick. The lie was over. But the continent was too concerned with the Shivers, a highly contagious flu with only a 20% survival rate. Many who caught it would start shivering one day and be dead by the next morning. It was unthinkable that a pure-born princess should die shivering, as if she were some common child, and yet she had. Even as they mourned for her, Jaehaerys and Alysanne must also have been confronting that awful realization. Mayhaps the Targaryens were not so close to gods as they had believed. Mayhaps in the end, they too were only men. Jaehaerys and his good queen Alysanne were cautious when it came to the devout followers of the Faith of the Seven. They had to control the High Septon for this doctrine of exceptionalism to still fly, because the High Septon, like many others, died to the Shivers. King Jaehaerys exploded the Targaryens' population with his sister wife. Maybe the reason for such few illnesses beforehand was due to such a small sample size. And who would be keeping note of every minor cold or flu? If diseases weren't doing them in previously, what was? Well, being primitive times, it was mostly childbirth complications and war. After Jaehaerys, the Maester visits started coming in. Another one of his 13 children died to an illness many years after little Princess Daenerys. This time, it was his daughter, Princess Mayhaps. Mayhaps was promised to the faith at a very young age, handed over to become a Septa as a way to keep the Targaryens and the Faith of the Seven cool. Septa Mayhaps, that gentle soul, died in 96 AC. Her arms and legs turned to stone by grayscale. She had spent her last years nursing those afflicted with that horrible condition. One of the worst ways to go. The spreading infection eventually gets to your brain, and then it gets real bad. People turn to literal monsters. One of King Jaehaerys' sons, Balon, died after his appendix bursted. Balon's son, the 5th king, Viserys, had some serious issues of his own in House of the Dragon. The books don't focus on this character much, but it does mention his struggles with gout and an infection from an Iron Throne wound that nearly took his life. The show sprinkles in some leprosy for this character's story arc, hidden from the public. The Grand Maester and other healers could only postpone his slow demise. Leprosy is very much a bacterial disease. Aegon III, 7th overall Targaryen king, died to consumption at the young age of 36. Gonna be honest, had to Google what that meant. Consumption's another word for tuberculosis, an illness that inflicts common man. The first known king to die from being sick, since the public believed King Viserys died peacefully in his sleep of natural causes. And still, crazy Viserys in the Game of Thrones era drank enough Targaryen Kool-Aid to still believe the propaganda. For a prince, he didn't have the most complete education, and everything Dany knows comes from him. She learns quickly and adapts very well, but the ignorance is still there. There's one more massive event that should have ended this life for good. Less than 100 years before Viserys was born, the Great Spring Sickness shattered the Seven Kingdoms in a similar fashion to the Shivers, a full-blown epidemic. Daeron II, one of the most loved kings, and his 2 heirs died during this year-long deadly spring. Roads had to be blocked to prevent the spread into other kingdoms, but there was no hope for King's Landing, the most populous city. There's not much else written aside from one of the more recent kings, sickly Jaehaerys II not surviving a short-lived illness. Mental health within this crazy incest family is a whole other topic. Another Targaryen lore book is still in the works that'll fill in some blanks in past characters' backstories, which means more disease, more illnesses. There's still so many causes of deaths left up in the air. And maybe one day we'll find out the cause of Dany's diarrhea. Thanks for watching, guys.